Your family-based priority date is current. What do you do now? If you are in this situation, congratulations. I know you've been waiting a long time, whether it's been months or potentially even years that you've been waiting for this moment when your priority date is current. So we're going to talk in this video about what to do next once you determine that your priority date is current and some common mistakes that I see people make that you will want to avoid. As always, this video is for informational purposes only and is not legal advice. So first of all, keep in mind that immediate relatives of US citizens don't have to worry about the priority date, right? Because they are not subject to an annual numerical limitation and the number of green cards that are available. So if you are the spouse of a US citizen or minor child of a US citizen, or the parent of an adult US citizen, age 21 or older, you don't have to worry about priority dates because there is not a limit on the number of green cards available for you, which is fantastic. If you're not sure what a priority date is, what the Visa Bulletin is, check out our video in our Sumner School Family Immigration Basics YouTube series. We have a number of videos about the priority date, the Visa Bulletin, and what that all means, the different classifications. So check that out if you are not sure. So once you've determined that your priority date is current, make sure that you're looking at the correct chart on the Visa Bulletin. So the Visa Bulletin, as you probably know, is published once a month by the Department of State, and there are two charts under the family-based categories. There is final action and dates for filing. You want to make sure that you understand in which chart your priority date is current, because that will help you determine your next steps. So make sure you know if you're looking at final action dates or dates for filing. Remember that if your priority date is current per final action date, that means that a green card is available in that particular month. If your priority date is current per dates for filing, that means that the Department of State, which is the agency that puts together the Visa Bulletin, has determined that a green card will likely be available for you in the foreseeable future, but it's not available right now. That doesn't mean that there aren't steps that you need to take right now, but keep in mind that your priority date does have to be current per the final action date in order for the green card or immigrant visa to be approved. So make sure you understand which chart you're looking at and what the next steps are, which is what we'll talk about next. So once you know which chart you're looking at, final action dates or dates for filing, which one where your priority date is current, and it could be current per both, which would be great. But then you want to think about what is your path for obtaining your green card. Are you filing for the adjustment of status, which is Form I-485 here in the United States, or are you pursuing your immigrant visa through the consular processing process outside of the United States? Most of the time, it depends on where, not always, but most of the time it depends on where you are, right? So if you're in the United States in valid immigration status or in valid non-immigrant status, a temporary status classification, and in certain other circumstances, then you would probably be pursuing the adjustment of status. If you're living outside the United States, you would probably be pursuing the immigrant visa at the US consulate, but it's important to know which one. So let's break this down further, right? If you are in the United States and you plan to file the I-485 to apply for what's called the adjustment of status, the green card application here in the United States, know first that you have to be here in the United States. You can't file an adjustment of status, which is also the Form I-485, from outside of the United States. I have clients ask that all the time. Unfortunately, it is not possible. You have to be in the United States, physically present in the United States. Also, if you're filing the adjustment of status here in the United States, you want to make sure that you're actually eligible for the green card. So this is when you'll want to speak with a qualified immigration attorney to make sure that you don't have status issues. Generally speaking, there are a few exceptions, but generally speaking, you have to be in valid non-immigrant status in order to file the I-485 here in the United States. In addition, as I said a minute ago, you want to make sure that you know whether your priority date is current per dates for filing or final action date. If your I-485 has already been filed and your date is current per dates for filing, you probably don't need to do anything, right? Because your date is not current per final action yet. However, if you have already filed the I-485 and if your priority date is current per the final action date, you can expect a next step from the USCIS, and you could even follow up with USCIS if you wanted to remind them professionally, kindly, that the priority date is current. So what could you expect? You could expect an interview to be scheduled if that hasn't already happened. You could expect a request for evidence asking for some additional documentation, or you could expect an approval, a decision from USCIS. Any of those are possible when your priority date is current. And keep in mind, like I said, your priority date has to be current per final action for that green card to be approved. If you have not yet filed the I-485, and again, you're here in the United States in valid non-immigrant status, then you want to look at, again, where is your priority date current? Is it current per final action or dates for filing? And then you have to look at the USCIS website, because every month USCIS tells us whether they will accept family-based adjustment filings per the final action date chart or the dates for filing chart. So you want to make sure that that is done. If you are filing from outside the United States, if you're going to file through the National Visa Center and apply for an immigrant visa eventually at the U.S. Consulate overseas, again, think about where you are in that process. Have you already submitted documentation to the National Visa Center? Has your case been deemed documentarily qualified? Or do you still need to submit documentation to the National Visa Center? So let's talk about if you've already submitted documentation to the National Visa Center and you're waiting for the interview to be scheduled. Again, look at the date, look at the charts. If your date is current per final action dates, then you can expect the NVC to schedule, the National Visa Center to schedule your interview with your immigrant visa interview with the US Consulate overseas, and potentially to send you an email requesting additional documentation, that updated documentation that they will ask you to upload to the SEAC portal. If you have not submitted your documentation already to the National Visa Center, and if your priority date is current per dates for filing or final action date, then make sure that you check in with the NVC and see what needs to be done. It depends on where you are in the process, how far away your date is, but check in with the National Visa Center. Remember, you have to keep that check in with them at least once a year to keep your case alive. But check in to see if you need to upload, if it's time to upload documentation to the NVC. If your priority date is current per the dates for filing and you haven't heard from the National Visa Center, I'd say within like a week or so after the priority date becoming current, you might want to check in with the NVC and just remind them, hey, my priority date is current. Is there anything you need? When can I expect to be scheduled with the consulate? Remember, if you are applying from outside of the United States, that there is a pause for 75 countries for the immigrant visa classification. So your interview may still be scheduled, but your visa will not be issued until that pause is addressed. Likewise, if you're applying from within the United States, make sure that you're aware of any current, I'm recording this in March 2026, but make sure that you're aware of any current pauses on processes here in the United States. Specifically, there is a pause on the adjudication of petitions and applications that are filed by foreign nationals from certain countries for which we have a travel ban in place. So the travel ban itself applies to individuals entering the United States, but the pause applies to any petitions that they have filed or applications that you filed in the US. So that could affect the processing of your I-485. So what are some common mistakes? And I know that was a lot of information. There are a lot of things to think about depending on whether you are filing from the United States or from overseas and where you are in the process. So the major things you need to be thinking about here are what I just said. Are you filing from here in the United States, filing that adjustment of status, or are you filing with a National Visa Center? Is your priority date current per final action or per the dates for filing? For either one of those situations, and think about where you are in the process. If you have already submitted everything, it might be just a matter of waiting or following up with the relevant government agency. If you have not submitted everything, that brings us to our first tip for common mistakes that we see, which is not acting quickly. I am not saying rush through and get this done, in an expedited emergency basis. It's not reason to freak out or, to stress out, but you do want to make sure that you are submitting your documentation as quickly as you can once the priority date is current, once you're able to submit that documentation, or that you're able to follow up with USCIS if you need to, or the NVC if you need to, because priority dates can retrogress. So just because it's current this month, either per dates for filing or a final action date, does not mean it will be current in a following month. So you might lose your chance, at least for now, to file or have the case move forward if it does not move forward this month. So make sure that you're acting quickly, expeditiously, and accurately, right? You want to make sure you take the time to make sure you're submitting all of the correct information. Tip number 2 of things that I see that people do that are that's incorrect and that slows down their case is relying on the wrong chart. So we've spent a lot of time talking about final action versus dates for filing. Make sure that you understand if your priority date is current per final action or dates for filing and what that means for your particular case and what the next step is. Another mistake I see is waiting too long, letting your status expire. So if you are here in the United States, for the most part, if you're filing a preference-based, family-based category, you have to be in valid non-immigrant status in order to file. So if you are not in status, if you maybe entered and let your status expire, or maybe you didn't enter with proper documentation, that can be a reason that the I-485 would be denied and ultimately could land you in removal proceedings. So again, you want to make sure that you're confirming or ideally working with a qualified immigration lawyer to make sure that all of those facets are thoroughly analyzed and addressed before you actually file, so you can know what to expect. And then finally, traveling without the advance parole. So if you are here in the United States and you file the I-485, there are some visa classifications that allow for dual intent, meaning you can hold that visa classification and travel back and forth. Primarily, that's the H-1B and the L. If you don't have one of those visa classifications, or even if you do, honestly, if you're filing the I-485, please make sure that you have a conversation with a qualified immigration attorney before you leave the United States. Because if you leave, in a lot of circumstances, if you leave without having the travel document, also called the advance parole document, approved, before you leave the United States, the process can be, or the green card can be deemed abandoned and denied. So you don't want to do that after you've waited all this time for the priority date to be current. So in conclusion, make sure that you are acting quickly. Priority dates move quickly. They can and will retrogress. Your particular priority date may or may not retrogress, but priority dates retrogress all the time. So you want to make sure that you act now while you can, and that you're submitting the proper documentation and taking the appropriate next step. If you're not sure what that is, that's what we're here for. At Sumner Immigration Law, we help clients walk through the family-based immigration process and employment-based process. We work with clients from all over the world and all over the United States, and we would be happy to help you next. There will be information on the outro slide, so the next slide here, about how to contact us to set up a time for a consultation or to talk with us about next steps. I hope you have found this information helpful. If so, I hope you'll share this video with a family member or friend. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on alerts so you don't miss our next video. Until next time, my name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law.